Hello, it's time for another I Ching video, and today we're doing hexagram from the Magician's I Ching. We're doing hexagram number 13. Hexagram number 13 is Tongren, which means fellowship. And you might note about this hexagram that it has only a single broken line, a single yin line. All the other ones are solid lines. They're all yang. The bottom trigram is therefore the sun. Drawing a bad image of the sun there. And the top, bottom is the sun, and the top is heaven. So this is the heaven over the sun. And this hexagram, in English, it's generally translated as fellowship. And it's considered on the whole, a very auspicious hexagram because, of course, the sun and heaven are two elements that are both very positive sorts of elements. Now, one of the interesting details about this hexagram is the nature of it being one of those hexagrams that has only a single line that is different from all the others. All the other ones are yang and this one is yin. And sometimes that can be bad, sometimes it can be good. Often it can represent an excess of one type of force instead of another. But here you have a very interesting situation, which is that the yin is in the right place for its type. Yang lines are best suited in odd numbered lines, and remember with the I Ching you always count the lines from the bottom. So this is line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, line 5, line 6, right? So line 2, being an even numbered line, is a good place for a yin line to have, for a feminine line, the line with the gap, the broken line, whatever you want to call it, to have that position. And the effect of that is that all of the other lines unite in its orbit. So the effect is sort of like, you know, when there's one person, and that person is actually maybe the unusual person in a group, in a social situation, in a party, or in a working group, or what have you. And specifically because they're the unusual person, they're not the one that is in line with the others. The others end up kind of circulating around it. And that's sort of the imagery of this hexagram. So reading from the Magician's I Ching here, the description says, finding fellowship even in distant barbarian lands, success, establish fellowship, cross great rivers. The superior individual benefits if he keeps pushing rightly. The great work says the superior individual treats others as he would himself. He finds similarities and cause for brotherhood even among foreigners. So this hexagram has a lot to do with this idea of creating harmony with the other. And in the external sense, this is about establishing harmony with people around you that aren't necessarily like you, right? And for uniting for a common cause, working together, discovering how to establish that fellowship. And in an internal sense, it has to do with finding harmony with that part of you that maybe doesn't fit in to the other parts of you. And these are important things to keep in mind in interpreting this hexagram if you receive it in an I Ching casting or divination. Confucius comments that someone weak occupies the central position, the one at the bottom, right? Well, the second, not the bottom, the second line. They dominate the bottom bottom trigram, the sun trigram. It occupies the central position, but responds well to the creative force. The creative force as a whole is heaven, which is what's above, but specifically it's the middle line, line 5, because remember that each bottom line has a connection to each top trigram line. So line 1 has a connection to line 4, and line 2 to line 5, line 3 to line 6. And that means that if both of those lines are the same type of line, then that usually means it can't be very productive. But if they match their opposite, if you have yin and yang connecting to each other, then they end up working in harmony. And they're especially harmonious, and it's especially right, if each one is in its right position. And here you have the weak line is in the second position, which is an even numbered position. The strong line is in the 5th position, which is an odd numbered position. So you have a strong line in a position that is favorable to it, a weak line in the position that is favorable to it, and they are connecting to each other, being opposite types. And that's a big part of why the structure of this hexagram is how it is and what it represents. So the Confucian commentary continues by saying, this is the refining influence. And the Confucian interpretation here is that where you might find that some people around you don't behave necessarily the way you want them to, if you can, instead of entering into a conflict with them, if you can find places where you do connect and work on that connection, then you can develop from that connection a refining influence over the other person that leads you both to be able to coexist. The Confucian commentary continues, it's the pure virtue of the superior individual that lets them find brotherhood in others. Eventually, the 5 strong lines will integrate the weak line in number 2. The theme of the lines involves reaching out to a barbarian tribe, making peace with them, and integrating them into the kingdom. So in the interpretation of the individual lines, you have line 1 at the very bottom says, fellowship in your own neighborhood, no harm in that. So this is, remember, line 1 is always when you're right at the beginning, or it's, before anything really starts to happen. And so when you get line 1, it's talking about, well, making that sort of fellowship with the people you're already familiar with, which is okay, right? Like, that's good, but it doesn't really get you very far, right? So it says no harm in that. No harm in that in the context of I Ching means it's not something that's great, but it's not something that is harmful. Line 2 says fellowship with one's own tribe, trouble, disappointing, no growth. So line 2 is being a weak line. If line 2 is the changing line here, it means that instead of looking to connect to all the forces around you that are different than you, you're just sticking in with yourself. You're becoming insular. You're closing in on yourself. And this means that there's no possibility for growth. You're limiting yourself by only being within yourself, or by only connecting with the people that you already have fully established fellowship with. So getting line 2 as the changing line in a casting is not really a good result here, right? It's not terrible either, because all of this hexagram is kind of auspicious, but it's probably an undesirable result. Line 3 tells you a little story. It says, they planned an ambush, but then ran for the hills. They dared not attack for 3 years. So the story here is a group of people that are, trying to do an attack, but they find out that the fellowship of the people they're planning to attack is too strong. They can't overcome it, and so they go away, and they don't cause trouble again for 3 years. You can see how this could apply in a divination if you're dealing with issues about certain people, trying to cause trouble for you. The significance of this is really that you have above this, the reason it says 3 is you have 3 solid lines above, the force of heaven, right? Line 3 is trying to dominate line 2, but if line 2 aligns itself with line 5, the force of heaven is on its side. And so they realize, the people trying to dominate line 2 realize that that's too strong. This is kind of a message that says, so if there's some people that maybe you're not completely in harmony with, that are trying to dominate you, and then there's some other people that you're also not completely in harmony with, but you can find fellowship with them, that will end up giving you security against the people that the first group of people that are trying to cause trouble for you. Line 4 says, they besieged the city walls, but then pulled back. A ceasefire was declared. Good luck. So this is an interesting line, because here you have your crossing from the lower trigram to the upper trigram. And in line 4, the idea is that you're still in a mentality where you're trying to fight your way to success. And you're going to fail at that. But in the end, it'll be a good thing that you fail at that, because you end up finding a way to make peace that is a better resolution for you. Okay, so if you're still on the kind of war footing by the time you get line 4 in a divination, it says you're going to fail at this, and then it's going to turn out to not be that bad that you failed. It's actually going to be a positive for you in the long run. Line 5 says, trying to establish fellowship with a foreigner. There's weeping and shouting at first, but laughter in the end. Joining forces, they win a great battle, and others come to their side. So this is all about the harmony between line 5 and line 2. If you reach out, you establish fellowship with the foreigner. Line 5 is, part of the dominating lines here. Line 2 is the foreigner, and you're coming together and making an alliance. At first, it's going to be difficult, right? It's never easy to make a connection to people who are more different than you than the same, right? And at first, there can be weeping and there can be shouting, right? There's conflict to work out. But in the end, there can be laughter. If you work together, then you can end up winning great battles and bring other people in to your side and create prosperity. And then line 6 is, as you know, the line that is after the resolution of the situation, right? It's after the ending, you could say, of the hexagram. And in this hexagram, line 6 says, he looks for fellowship in lonely frontier regions. No fellowship is found, but there was no blame in having tried. So it suggests that at this point, you're trying to find fellowship, and there's nowhere that you can establish that fellowship. There's not there. If there in the end, there are situations where the differences are so vast that no fellowship can be achieved. But the effort to try to make fellowship, right, even with the most distant barbarians from you, right? I mean, the barbarians here sounds, a fairly insulting kind of term. But the meaning of it is, people far away from you, right? And people aren't from your own tribe, as it were, right? And so there might be times when the distance is so great that you can't end up making that fellowship. You can't establish it. You can't succeed in what your goal was. But it's still considered virtuous to make the attempt. And when it turns out that you can't later, then other measures might have to be taken. But the advice here from the point of view of the sage is to still attempt it, right? So the overall kind of meaning of this hexagram is to establish harmony between different people and within aspects of yourself, right? And if you can do this, then you're going to have a very auspicious result. And in the cases where you end up not really showing the ability to achieve this, the results are going to be much more suboptimal than you would hope, especially because one of the things you kind of have to figure out in this hexagram is whether you're part of the group of, all those yang lines, right? If you're part of the majority group here, or if you're the minority group, right? And how you should act will kind of depend on where you sit in that relationship when you're doing a casting, right? But in either case, it's saying the benefit of fellowship benefits both the dominant force and the weaker force. Both of them stand to gain from each other because they both end up being able to contribute to each other. And that's kind of a very modern message for a 3,000-year-old book, right? I mean, this is ancient wisdom that very much applies in modern times. So that's the public video for this hexagram. People who are members of the Fa Society will also end up getting another video that goes much deeper into the commentary and the esoteric interpretation of this hexagram. And if you're interested in serious study of the I Ching as part of an overall curriculum of spiritual practices that include meditations and Qi work, Qigong, then you should get in touch with me about joining the Fa Society and being able to deepen your understanding of this as part of a process, a training program of spiritual self-transformation. And if you're not sure if you're ready for that, but you'd like to keep hearing more about me, well, obviously subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell and check out the other videos in this channel, the different playlists, and specifically the playlist that this one is on, which is the playlist of the Fa Society, where you'll see the commentaries to the other I Ching hexagrams I've done so far. But also check out in the description, there will be a link to where you can sign up for my newsletter. And you can sign up on it. There's the Fa Society blog. And if you sign up for my newsletter, it's free, and you'll get once or twice a month, no more than that, a newsletter that will give you a bunch of links to different teachings and talks I've given and different things I've covered during the month, you could say. And there'll usually be some piece of original material that's just for the subscribers. It's free, and besides that, everyone who signs up, when you get your message confirming that you're signed up, take a look, because you'll find a link there to a free PDF copy of my new book, The Path and the Power, which is a interpretation and commentary of the Tao Te Ching. So if you've already got the Magician's I Ching, and if you don't have it, you should buy it. But if you do already have the Magician's I Ching, then the Path and the Power is a complementary kind of book. It's the other great text, the other great spiritual text of Chinese culture. And I'm sure you'll enjoy it, and it's, you can't argue with free for the price, right? So be sure to check out the newsletter, sign up, get your copy of The Path and the Power, and sign up for the YouTube channel as well if you're not already subscribed. Thank you very much.